Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on climate change and impact investment. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Card, Professor David Smith and Mr. James Heath. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. Card.
Yeah, well, so the topic is just renewable energy today.
Yes, climate change and impact investment.
Okay. I used to be a science teacher, and then for a few years, I wrote about renewable energy for Clean Technica. I've taken a step back a little bit from writing on it, but it's still something I follow closely. It's been amazing the last 2 decades. Just the advancements have been superb. Wind and solar continuing to drop in price. Energy storage is dropping in cost because EVs are driving down the price of batteries. Lots of challenges. There's a lot more than just those three things to solve. There's hundreds of different things we have to tackle to reduce carbon emissions, but it's happened faster than I ever would have imagined. It's happened faster than almost anyone that I followed in the space. There's a few people that predicted it right. But so I just, in my environmental advocacy, I just try to talk a lot about the positivity of where the technology is going. I've had to kind of just for my sanity, keep away from the politics to a degree. Of course, politics are a huge thing, but for the most part, the scientists, the innovators, the businessmen that are tackling this issue are just having to use science and sheer willpower to get it done for the most part. And it looks like it's my belief that we have a chance of stopping the worst of climate change. We're going to be cutting it close. We may need negative emissions, although that's something that we really don't want to talk about because we don't want people to be lazy. And so, yeah, it's good to. I mean, I think I was on the panel with James before, so it's good to see you back. And yeah, I'll kind of turn the mic over to who's ever next.
Thank you, Mr. David Smith.
Sharif, thank you so much. Because if we think about climate change and particularly in regards with investments, a lot has happened in that area too, in addition to, as was stated, the overall impact of what we're doing with climate change activities. If looking at some of the statistics, over the last 5 years, more than $1.5 trillion in private investments went towards climate finance. And undoubtedly, in addition to the NGOs and the government spending and the large corporate spending, private capital is going to play a key role in contributing to the over $150 trillion in investments that are required to achieve net zero globally by 2050. But even though that amount of money has gone into it, many investors are unclear if their capital is really having an impact, and how can that impact be measured. And there's groups being formed right now to begin to try to quantify that and begin to see a way to track and verify that the money is actually going into climate change activities. But to look at the overall bigger scope of it, investors trade about $250 trillion worth of stock bonds every year. So even though that's what we were talking about, there's a lot of money, it pales in looking at what the overall investments are and how you can begin to handle those and how they can begin to play. But companies and individuals are both continuing to invest more time, more resources, more money, more leadership activities into sustainability and climate change. And you begin to see ESG disclosures put in place with many companies, which are beginning to help with the area of climate change and investment strategy and the activities there. However, there is still a significant disconnect between what companies are doing in the investment side, what actions are being taken by companies, governments, regulatories, and NGOs on the other side, and what the private investors can do. And you're beginning to see more and more cooperatives of private investors beginning to try to work on this. The other interesting thing in climate change and investing is there's a disconnect on long-term value, on short-term thinking, and on sustainability. And so to kind of work that and close the gap, there's still a lot of work that needs to be happening on there because, climate change, it has become an investment. To use one of the words from another futurist, a megatrend. And you see the wildfires, the heat waves, the hurricanes, like the one that is going through the Caribbean today, growing in frequency and intensity. You see regulators beginning to look at how can they put regulations in place to help with it. And we're seeing increased damages. One of the recent statistics from Morgan Stanley is that between 2016 and 2018, climate change related weather events caused more than $630 billion in economic damage worldwide. And you begin to see that you have to have other types of investment to begin to have an impact there. The same Morgan Stanley report said that 78% of U.S. individual investors that they surveyed are interested in addressing climate change through their investment. So there is a interest there from the individual investors, but it all has to be a balancing act on how it can be applied, who the investment fund should go to, what KPIs are important, and really are there regulatory activities that should be put in place to assure the transparency of those investments. So Sharif, I think that's my opening remarks.
Mr. James, what you want to discuss about climate change and about impact investment?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this subject, Sharif. It's one of the crises that face us, and it's, as I think Kurt was pointing out, it's not something that's in the future. It's happening now. David reinforced this with what's going on with storms and hurricanes and that sort of thing. You know, the things that used to be a once in a century occurrence are happening every 5 years, and the intensity is greater. You know, these types of things, there's just flooding where there isn't used to be flooding, and there's drought where there didn't used to be drought. And all of these things, you know, as David taught me, you know, it's a system of systems. Climate is a system of weather systems. And these weather systems are changing, and the climate has been changing. And why? Well, since the dawn of industrial society, we have been polluting the waters and entering toxics into the waters and air. And this is now becoming something of a problem when we cannot breathe the air anymore. And that's what's stimulating people into response. Now, you know, I've been published quite a bit, but the first time I was published was in the late 70s, and it was about the alternative energy laws that existed in the 10 northeastern states. And so this is not a new topic. You know, I took an environmental energy course in the 1970s, and what we've been lacking is the political and individual will, because, you know, we know this has been coming. We know that we are coming up against a time where what technology will not save us. It'll be irreversible. So, you know, it's only when we're starting to see these wildfires and all of these other things that David mentioned that people are starting to think, wow, this is happening now. It's not something I have to worry about for my children or grandchildren. It's something that I actually have to worry about. You know, people had died that I knew from breathing toxic air as a result of wildfires. You know, so this hits home. And now David mentioned ESG, you know, it's environmental, social, and governance. And that's something that I didn't didn't know. That's the kind of investing that is in the trending now. We used to call it green technology, but the ESG technology and investments is growing. But as David mentioned, it's still a very tiny fraction of what the overall investments are. And we have to pay attention to the fact is that not only do we not have the individual will, although that is changing, thank goodness, we still lack the political will, because many of the politicians their campaigns are funded by the energy companies. And the energy companies have a vested interest in us maintaining our addiction to fossil fuels. Now, if we can wean ourselves off of these fossil fuels, our job becomes much easier. And the other thing is it's a global phenomenon. One country can't do it. So, we've gotten it into our heads that we're a global economy. But what we haven't figured out is that we're a global community now. And we need to act like a global community and take care of each other. Whatever country you're from, whatever language you speak, it just doesn't matter. We're all in this together. Thank you, Sharif.
Mr. Dan.
Welcome,
we are discussing
everyone.
about climate change and impact investment.
Yes. This is going to be a big part of the Ross Tweed 2024 United States Transhumanist Party campaign, of which I'm proud to be the vice presidential candidate. We're not on the ballot yet, but we'll at least have write-in status. And so, yes, I think the debate over climate change is, of course, many faceted. The troubling thing I see is that the climate emergency is just a subset of the spaceship Earth biosphere emergency. We are in a mass extinction. We are disrupting systems in ways we can't predict. The whole fossil fuel burning that caused the Industrial Revolution was the largest uncontrolled experiment in the history of humanity, probably. Sometimes I feel like we're a bunch of cave people sitting around talking about, so what do you think of this new fire thing? How is that going to change our lives? And, it's like, oh, yeah, I know a lot about fire. I saw a fire once, and then you're an expert, right? But I think this is going to have to, we're actually lucky that we have AI to take advantage of in helping with this problem, because I think what we need to do, and this is going to be what I'm proposing, is kind of a Dunbar number by Dunbar number, and that's about 150 people. That's the average city. The neighborhood block has about 150 people, and we will do a survey of the biosphere using citizen science and the amateur radio community, which is a worldwide community. Citizen science initiatives have been known about for a long time. There's a great group up in Berkeley called BOINC, Berkeley Open Infrastructure for Networked Computing, and they have about 3,000 projects going. But there's about a dozen other portals to do citizen science. And the key, I think, is adding this geolocation component. I've talked about before, there's an app you can put on your phone, even an old phone that doesn't have a subscription on it. It is called What 3 Words, and it basically is about a 50 megabyte database that maps the entire world into 3 meter by 3 meter grids, and they're each uniquely named with a 3-word name from the dictionary. It's like 3 random words, but it's like if you needed something delivered, to an open field, you could actually give them these 3 words, and they could have the app. They could look it up and say, oh, okay, here's where I need to bring the pizza, or where I need to rescue the person. So this gives us a new level of geospatial granularity that was not typically available throughout most of the information revolution. In fact, I think this geoinformatics is the maturing of the information revolution. So we combine this with off-grid communication, like amateur radio. I'm an extra class licensed ham with call sign KK6VDR. In fact, field day weekend, big day for amateur radio people. It's always the last full weekend in June. They're going to be out there in parks with their mobile battery power and their mobile antennas. And it's really a great hobby. I mean, it's the life-saving hobby that cares about teaching and helping people. So, we have actually one of our Transhumanist Party members, the state chair for Arizona, David Schumacher, is another licensed ham. So it's pretty easy to pass the amateur radio exam. And if you don't want to do that, there's actually another thing called Global Mobile Radio Service, GMRS, where you just pay a fee. There's no test involved. And then you've got access to repeaters. And it's way better than the old CB radio or the family radio service. But all these things are needed. In an emergency, the rule is do whatever you have to do to get the message out. It's like take all the rules and throw them out the window. You need to send an SOS by sparking wires together or interrupting the phone line. Well, hopefully you don't want to damage anything, but if it's a matter of life and death, the rule is do what you have to do to save lives. And I look at governments and they're not doing that. So can we depend on governments? Maybe we need to depend on our neighbors. Maybe we need to depend on our faith institutions. Maybe we need to depend on our Rotary clubs or our Toastmasters. All these voluntary groups are not being utilized to save the spaceship Earth, because when you're in a lifeboat situation, as spaceship Earth might be getting toward, then you have lifeboat ethics, and they're not fun ethics, but you can't let people raid the stores. You can't let people drill holes in the lifeboat. You can't let people do all these things that are going to kill everyone if they do them. So we need AI, and we need decentralized location and communication networks, which are readily available in all kinds of forms. We need citizen science, and we need to ask AI, how can we coordinate all these resources to create a survey of our biosphere to make sure we haven't killed it beyond repair. It's a web of recycling food and life chains. So, and even sustainability, people use the word sustainability. No, we don't need to sustain. What we've got is not worth sustaining. We need regenerativity. We need to regenerate things. And people talk about cradle to grave life cycles for products and resources. No, we need cradle to cradle. We need it to close the loop and make it a circular contained system, because this is a self-contained spaceship Earth, and we'd better start treating it like it is, and we better all become crew instead of passengers. And thank the maker, we've got AI and ham radio and citizen science to do it. So that's going to be a big part of my campaign, and I'm going to make this gamified. So people don't do things unless they're fun. They might do them once, but they won't come back and keep doing them. So the gamification is going to be fun. We can have contests to see which neighborhood is doing better at counting the biosphere resources and all this stuff. And we'll create little shirt pocket size, little free libraries. Anyway, stay tuned. It's going to be a fun transhumanist campaign. And thanks for letting me spiel off about it today. Thanks.
Mr. Cart, we are discussing about climate change, and recently we have heat wave, we have natural disasters. It's actually growing around the world. So what type of initiative we can take to solve this kind of complex climate change oriented problem, and what is the real solution we have in hand right now?
There's lots of things you can do. I think it's important to pick something that you can be sustainable with. One of the problems in my environmental advocacy is there's some things that are really important, but they're you may not have any achievable short-term goals. There's some things that are very long-term, politics. And you'll see environmental activists always arguing, what's the best thing I can do with the time? What's the most important thing I can do with my time? And they'll start fighting with each other and be like, one group is like, oh, we got to stop eating meat. And the other group is, oh, we have to buy EVs. And the other group is, oh, we need a carbon tax. And so I think the first thing to do is pick something that interests you, motivates you, and that you can sustain doing. And it's fine if that's very small. The first thing is on a personal level is just to consume as little as possible. When you can, buy used things. You don't have to be a hermit living on nothing, but just whatever you can do to reduce your consumption. Of course, you can go with a plant-based diet. You don't have to completely cut out meat, but you can reduce meat. If you have money, early adoption is huge. I mean, I think we're starting to approach 4 or 5 million Teslas that have been sold. And over the time, the maybe 15 years that Tesla has been selling cars, they've dropped from over $100,000 to $40,000, and $25,000 to $30,000 is around the corner. And in that time, while the price has dropped, the technology has improved. The battery is lasting longer. It has more range. It has more autonomous driving features. It's safer than it was. So I've spent a lot of time in my environment. Life is key. Was kind of a Tesla fan, man, before Musk started becoming so political, and I had to take a step back from that just because the guy was kind of my hero, and he's still going to do important things. And Tesla is much more than just one man. But so that's been a lot of my advocacy is doing what I can on my personal consumption, advocating for early adoption. It's those 5 million people that bought the Teslas that just dropped the price of energy storage down by 90%. And energy storage is kind of the keystone of a renewable energy grid, because we can't go wind and solar and water without energy storage. So I think EVs are very, very big right now. People will talk about and say, an EV is not that great. I don't think you should look at the direct emissions that are avoided by owning EV. Think about all the indirect emissions that will be avoided by having affordable energy storage. We've got all kinds of different battery chemistries coming out. We hear about problems with cobalt. We hear about problems with lithium. We hear about problems with nickel. We don't have enough of these elements. They're on the wrong continent. Well, we've got sodium-ion batteries coming. We've got 15 different versions of batteries that are all competing to be number 2, 3, and 4 behind lithium-ion. So it's just, I think it's really important to be positive. If you look at marketing research, people will change their behavior if they can get behind a positive movement where they see a lot of people doing it. And I think one of the problems in the environmental advocacy that we have is we do a ton of fear, and we got millions of people doom scrolling all day long, and I'm guilty of doing that, of just doom scrolling about all the terrible things with climate change. Not to say that we need to stop that entirely, but having actionable short-term goals. It's okay. We don't have to pick the absolute best thing and all work on that. We can all find our own lanes and collaborate and just, but don't fight with each other. I've been in so many environmental groups where it is just way too many smart people who all think they have the absolute best idea. So I'll stop there.
Mr. David Smith.
Come on, Kurt. They all have the best idea. And you have to take the best ideas and combine them and collaborate to come out with the optimum solution.
Yeah.
So you have to begin to go through those. And that's the basis of where we are with climate change today. Not everyone, many people look at climate change by looking at the belly button, because it's what affects them, what's around them. But as James talked earlier, climate change is a great example of a system of systems. And almost everything today is a system of systems. And you have to treat climate change as a system of systems to be effective. And climate change is not defined to one region. It's not in one city. It's not in one state, or it's not in one country. It's a global challenge, and you have to attack it on a global basis to be effective. And the same with the investments around climate change. That's why individual investment in climate change is having some challenges today. in that you want to see results, but you want the real results on climate change is net zero emissions globally, and not really what I can do here in Austin, Texas, where I live. And you've got to take it and spread that out. I love your discussion on the different types of technologies that can be brought to bear. I mean, there's many of them. We can look at ways to remove some of the things from the atmosphere, and that's gaining a lot of speed now with some really great science working on how to remediate and move it from it. We're looking at ways to improve the ocean's ability to process and renew and help with climate change. We're seeing great progress with re-greening our landscape to put more photosynthesis and things in place to deal with it. So science and ecology and agriculture are beginning to play here. Where we're missing some of the parts is how do we, particularly Sharif, where you usually ask, how do we in universities, how do we in government, how do we in the various areas of the technopolis work together to create collaborative action that can have the ability to scale? And scale is one of the big things missing here. Have the ability to scale to treat and react to a global challenge versus the small regional ones that many of them tend to do. And I believe that's the issue that we have to play. And that's where impact investing, not just from individual impact investing, but corporate impact investing and NGO impact investing, like what you saw out of the last two United Nations COP conferences, where the first one did impact investing in large in developed nations. This last COP, the majority of the funding focused on developing nations. And you're going to have to see action like that, which is not just money thrown at it, but you need to see it with collaborative science, collaborative research, collaborative reaction go and be applied to have an impact. You know, I can go back and take my carbon emissions as low as I can. And unfortunately, Kirk, that doesn't include an EV because EVs are still carbon negative when you look at them today. My bet is going to be on the hydrogen car coming out because it has zero impact on climate, and it uses readily available sources in the air and in water for the hydrogen. So that's my long-term bet. To me, electric vehicles are a transitional technology to get us there. And I strongly believe that. But those are some of the thoughts, Sharif. I mean, this is an area where, unfortunately, there are no 100% right answers. Everything is a part of that system of systems, and everything is balanced with that. And it's very difficult to impact global action. And global actions is what is required to really get to the zero emissions by 2050 target. And we're going the wrong direction right now when you look at the statistics. So Sharif, thank you for letting me talk again.
Thank you, Mr. James.
Thank you, Sharif. Great discussion. You know, my thoughts are all jumbled because I want to address every single one of the things that everybody's brought up so far. And we don't have time, but I will concentrate on the individual, making it local. You know, because I'm not the best, but I got solar panels. I was an early adopter of Tesla. You know, I own Tesla stock, but I sold it because it was driving me crazy. And yeah, I'm not on Twitter anymore because of what Elon Musk. I used to be a fan, but I'm not anymore because I believe in democracy, and I'm not sure he does. And a lot of these issues that we're talking about, not only can you do what you can do, even if everyone does a small bit, it adds up to be a lot. So, think about what you can do. And people in your sphere of influence, you can influence them to do a little bit more, just a little bit more. And then they can influence the people around them to do just a little bit more. And everyone does a little bit more. It makes it a big deal. And when we talk about investments, invest in those companies that are trying, think whatever it is that you're into, is it carbon capture? Is that the kind of thing? Well, find a company that does that and support them. This is the kind of thing that you can do as an individual. So do the research that's necessary for you to think. I think the best thing is that we can do for the planet is desalination. So I'm going to find a company that does that. Whatever it is, if it's helping, then support it. And you can't do everything. No one can, but do a little. Everyone can. And the ideas that have been talked about, I don't know exactly, but I love the fact that the ocean was mentioned, because sometimes we forget about the dramatic effect that climate change has had on the ocean. And we have islands of plastic now in the ocean. That never happened in the history of the planet before. So the human influence on climate and on the planet cannot be denied. But we had a senator stand up in the Senate holding a snowball, denying it. And that wasn't that long ago. So people have to smarten up and wise up. And also, I really want to double down on what you're talking about, Kurt, about not getting into too much into fear and get a more positive message going. Because, what we do is we get discouraged. And what I've heard so often was, well, it doesn't matter what we do. If India doesn't change or China doesn't change, it doesn't matter what we do. And so it's an excuse, a lazy excuse for doing nothing. When, as I said, it's everybody's job to do a little. And, the denial is going away, but we also can be paralyzed by fear. So it's important to be positive and think that you're contributing to something that means so much, not only to you, but to the next generation and the next. And, we are talking about mass extinctions. And when the ocean goes, we all go. Water is life. And, what's happening to the estuaries doesn't get a lot of publicity, but the estuaries have phenomenal biodiversity, and we're losing it. And when we lose biodiversity, we don't adapt to our environment as well. The changes that have been brought on by the dawn of the industrial age have been so rapid, and they're getting more rapid. So we don't have time to physically go through evolution and adapt that way. So we have to adapt by changing our minds, by the way we think about these things. And as we adapt by changing how we think, the manner in which we think about these problems, don't be discouraged. Do your part. If it's a small part. And don't bother comparing yourself to others. So-and-so does more than I do. Oh, I'm not a good person. No, do what you can. And just influence others to do what they can. Be polite about it. But, you can lead by example. So I encourage people to be positive. And the message is that there is nothing that we can't do. We can conquer this challenge as well as we've conquered many others. But we must rise to the occasion, because the occasion is now. It's not something we can put off. Procrastination is not our friend. It's time to take action. Yesterday was time to take action. But we can't do anything about yesterday. We can do something about today. Thanks again for the opportunity to speak on this important subject, Sharif.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel.
Yeah, great insights there, James. Who was it that said be vigilant and don't preach? I thought that was great advice. Someone, but human behavior typically, I think, is exemplified by two things, and that's do what the herd is doing. The herd is usually right, and the other thing is don't act until you're forced to. And that has served the majority of life forms pretty well through the majority of evolution. But those aren't going to work anymore. If you do what the herd is doing when the herd is running off a cliff, not so good. If you, if you don't act until you're forced to. It's too late to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. You should have run away when you saw its eyes glowing at you across the savannah. So we could be proactive. We should make an ethic of proactivity. And one thing I like to talk about is the thing called the Overton window. And that's kind of, someone said, this is the sociological margins of what's okay to talk about in public or in mainstream conversation. And I think you don't get these Overton window changes until you get perspective level changes. And that brings up another thing that I'm a fan of, the overview effect. Sounds like Overton window, but it's the overview effect. And this was about a change in consciousness that about 10% of the astronauts that left Earth had this profound philosophical experience of seeing the Earth, hanging in the velvet black infinite vacuum. And they just thought, wow, we've got to take care of this fragile little thing. And look, there's no boundaries. And look, we're all one. And so if we could, there's a great documentary, actually, just Google or search overview effect. I think Frank Wharton is the guy that made it. And his kind of life goal is finding ways to expose people to this perspective shifting experience. And you can actually do this without leaving the planet. There's ways to do it. Virtual reality and scale models are great. So you can get like mini overview effects, but I think these overview effects, the more people that experience them, that's what's going to shift the Overton window of what's okay to discuss. And, there's a huge backlash about the status quo is like, oh, this climate change, it's all commie nonsense. Even Trump said this is like a scheme by communist China to destroy the economy of the West, So this happened with the tobacco issue. They knew for decades and decades that, doctors are paid to smoke and pretend that cigarettes are healthy. But they fought the tobacco issue that, you can read that book, Merchants of Doubt, and you can see they're using the exact same playbook with the whole fossil fuel industry. It's kind of ironic, tobacco smoke, fossil fuel smoke. It's like, I think they have a smoke salary, life style problem. So yeah, I think impact investing, we need to change our idea of the economy. I've been saying, we need an economy based on love instead of extractive quantities of objects. There's a quote that I like. They say, if you're not doing something out of love, then you don't deserve to be paid for it. But, this should be a call to action, to find the thing that you love to do, because really money is just can be viewed as a counter of how many people also love what you're doing. It's not an evil thing. It's a mathematical thing. It doesn't have to be, hated and feared. And the other thing we've gotten wrong in history is property. You shouldn't, private property is great. Public property with a fence monopolizing it, not so great. I mean, you should be able to use natural resources, but you should pay a fair fee for that bundle of rights. And this already happens more and more. You have things like community land trust, community development trusts. You have people forming societies by contract. There's a great business plan called A Fierce, which Jeff Graubert is pushing. And this is how to create a voluntary society with no taxation or politics in 70 years. And it's all done through just buying up property and forming these communities and creating these internal systems of fee and dividend. Anyway, it's something else that I'm going to be trying to promote. If you want the foundation of this, there's a famous book from 1876 called Progress and Poverty, written by Henry George. He founded this whole movement called Georgism or Geoism. Actually, it goes back to people like John Locke, the Lockean proviso that says, you can mix your labor with land, but only if you leave it good enough for the next person. And it's easy to do this now with, I mean, in the old days, it was like, yeah, we need land. Let's get an army together and, and kill everyone that's on the land and then build a big wall around the land. Yeah, this is not going to work for modern day socioeconomics. So there's all kinds of fun and beneficial transformations that we can do with how we interact economically and property wise. And I think you can find agreement along all points of the political compass on good ideas. You know, we don't have to be having trench warfare about the little subset of things we disagree on. There's more that we agree on, more that binds us than divides us. And that's how we move forward. Thanks again, Sharif and everyone.
Thank you. Interesting. Mr. Card, if you share some of your view about impact investment in climate change projects, and if you share your final thoughts about today's session, that will be very helpful for our audience.
I don't know much specifically about impact investment. I do know about investment a bit. That one of the big successes the environmental community has is scared people from investing in fossil fuels, and so hopefully we can keep that going. You know, the divestment movement was big. Keep that going. I definitely think we need to pressure companies to, you know, especially these fossil fuel companies. Some of them are starting to do pretty decent. Total in Europe is getting a really large renewable energy portfolio. You know, a solar farm can be put up in 6 to 12 months, and it's a mature industry now. For example, having some problem with regulations, which are slowing that down, unfortunately. The market forces are ready to take off for solar, wind, and energy storage. I guess I'll just kind of defer back to the rest of the panel since I'm not prepared for the topic today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. David Smith.
I agree with what has been said actually by most of everyone. The only thing I kind of disagree with is we have to look at this on a basis of what happens in the areas where people do not take action against climate change. And that to me is a dilemma that is going to be really hard to reconcile. I mean, if we look at some things, for example, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has been horrible for the environment, has been absolutely horrible for climate change. But, you know, what can we do? I would love to see some of the impacts there go away. China, surprisingly, has been pretty proactive in the last year in reducing some of their footprint. They were trending the other direction, but there has been some recent action that shows that they're becoming part of the global community and are trying to take actions against climate change. And that we've also seen the impact of climate weather changes. For example, the El Nino that we're in right now in my part of the world. It is impacting our climate action as well in both positive ways and negative ways. And so how do we balance those and how do we put them in place? Those of you who listen to this program know I'm a technologist, I'm a futurist, and I have been throughout my career heavily involved not only in research and development, but also in solving and producing roadmaps on what have been called wicked problems. climate change and how to pay for dealing with climate change is a wicked problem. One of the characteristics of wicked problems is that as you begin to solve them, they morph and they change, and they're a different problem than when you started. And climate change is one of those wicked problems. And because of that, the ability to innovate is key to solving these wicked problems, to innovate, collaborate, and to work on the large scale, because a wicked problem is a large scale problem. And we're system dynamics and chaos theory and the ability to work across many different boundaries, industry boundaries, cultural boundaries, geopolitical boundaries, is going to be necessary to be successful. And that is why this whole area of system dynamics is so vitally important as we look at climate change and impact investing, because you have to do it within a scale like that to be able to have the impacts we're desiring. And that is kind of what it is. I mean, I love Daniel's comment in the comments that we're doing that. I mean, Daniel, one of the places I'm helping work with wicked problems today is NASA. And they are trying to look at how to use wicked problems as a design approach in dealing with some of the biggest challenges we're facing today in aerospace, and climate change is driving a lot of the big challenges in aerospace today. And so you see that coming into play. But this is a problem. I wish we had a magic wand and we could wave, but we don't. I wish it was something that a company or a nation could do a moon launch project against and solve the problem, but it's more complex than even one of the dramatically big moon launch type projects you can do on a country basis. And so, Sharif, you choose great topics, and this is one that is a topic that's going to be around for decades, and it will continue to change, continue to morph and evolve. But it's one that we have to work on, we have to be successful on. So, Sharif, thank you so much again for you bringing visibility to this topic yet again. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Jamsid.
Yes, I second that, Sharif. Thank you for this topic. And Kurt, you don't worry about being prepared for this. I found your comments to be excellent and right on point. And I really want to hit more subjects than I have time for. But you know, David, if you grew up around in Boston, you know, it's a different way of saying wicked problems. And you don't know if that's a good wicked or a bad wicked. But I think that, you know, one of the things I want to highlight is, again, energy storage is a subject that Kurt brought up, you know, because I do believe in technology as well, but unless we have the political will to do this, we can't wait around for corporations to think it's cost effective to do it. Sometimes we have to have regulations in place. Now, regulations can be a problem, regulations can be a help. I remember when a river was burning in America, in the United States, and we poured PCPs into the rivers that poisoned the people and the flora and fauna below. So we needed regulations to put in place to stop that. And now we need some help from the government, perhaps, to build the infrastructure to support electric vehicles, or maybe the hydrogen vehicles, as David postulated. And the other thing we need is appropriate technology. You know, don't build solar panels where there's no sun. Don't build wind tunnels where there's no wind. You know, but where there is, do so. So appropriate technology in the right place at the right time can reduce our dependency on fossil fuels. And it's not cost effective now. You know, the cost benefit analysis has changed dramatically just in a brief period of time that we've been paying attention to it. And so it becomes more cost effective, the more people using it. And the more people that use it, then all of a sudden more people want to invest in it. And this just feeds on itself. And we can start doing the right thing. Even when buying a Tesla was expensive, it's come down in price. This is how these things work. And so technology might solve the storage battery problems, but get involved, right? Even when it's not perfect. Yeah, the rare earth element problems really bug me. But there might be solutions right around the corner to solve that problem. And the companies that are starting to do that kind of stuff, those are investment opportunities, man, because they're going to go big time. And they're going to start small, but they're going to grow. And this is what we look for when we try to do this. So we do need federal support, but also the Fed can interfere as in raising these interest rates. We need these innovative technologies, these innovative companies that use these innovative technologies to start out. They need investment capital. And if you keep raising their borrowing costs, you're getting in the way. And there's a lot of arguments about, it's inflation. Well, job growth is not a problem. Good wages is not a problem. It's a sign of a good economy. The economy is not overheated. What we had was a dramatic global breakdown of the distribution system. And it's supply and demand. Well, the supply wasn't there, so it cost more. Scarcity, it costs more when things are scarce. And before we know it, water is going to be a scarce resource. So, who controls the water supply? That's going to be a big deal. So pay attention to these types of things, because what's going on right now, it's going to change, because the pace of change is dramatically different than it was. Grandfathers used to have kind of the same experience as grandchildren. And that's not true anymore. They live in a different world. It's not just the iPhones. Like, I can't help my niece with programming the iPhone, and I used to be a systems programmer for mainframes, but she knows so much more than I do. It's a different world, and the pace of change is going like this. It's a hockey stick. It was the same way for a long time, and then boom, the pace of change is accelerated. So whatever change is taking place, I think we're up for it, but we have to pay attention to what's going on, and we have to be willing to take action. And we have to be willing to do it as a team together, because a lot of people think about capitalism and competition. David mentioned one of the words is, collaboration, cooperation. Those are C words too. And that's what we need. And we need to start thinking about us as a global community, not one country against each other. We're all in this together. When we adopt that mindset, we're going to have a real fighting chance. Take the appropriate action at the appropriate time all over the world. Again, it doesn't matter what country you're from, doesn't matter what language you speak. When it comes to climate change, we're all in this together. Thanks again, Sharif.
Mr. Daniel.
Oops. Yeah, I think the process of civilization has been one of moving the stakeholders and the decision makers closer and closer together. In the old days, you didn't have a say in what happened for most of your life. There was a king or a central authority or someone that told you where you were going to live, what you were going to do, end of the story. And, we recently had a little foreign policy kerfluffle. Someone called the head of China a dictator, and they didn't like that. It's like, but you know what? What's the CEO of a corporation? I mean, they're kind of a dictator. They get to say who gets fired and hired and what gets done. Now, of course, there's corporate personhood and there's a fiduciary responsibility to the stakeholders, the investors. And this is actually another problem, because corporations in an economy, they kind of act like cancerous cells that prioritize growth, just quantity over quality. All we got to do is maximize return more and more every year. And, that's not going to work until we have expanded out beyond the Earth into the solar system. which I think is something that we can do. There was a Russian astronomer named Nikolai Kardashev in 1964, and he came up with something called the Kardashev scale, and that's a way of describing how advanced your civilization is in terms of energy usage. Right now, we're using less than the energy that falls on our planet, so we're about Kardashev 0.7 on that scale. But when you are using all the energy that comes out of your local star, which we could do, Freeman Dyson proposed a Dyson sphere where we've got, we're harvesting all the sunlight from the star. That would be a Kardashev level 2 civilization. And then if you get to harvest all the energy of a galaxy, we don't know if that's anyone's doing that, but that would be level 3. But so that's a useful way to think about, to kind of like overview that overview effect that, people that say it's only one Earth. No, it's a solar system, and it's got however many planets and planetoids and asteroids and comets. And we are on the verge of economically accessing all that solar system wealth. But we are going to need due process, level playing field rules. Like, okay, if you want to put your spacecraft here, you need to respect everyone else's rights, maybe pay a user fee. We don't have to fight over these things, and we should treat the Earth the same way. Robert Heinlein, the science fiction writer, said, "It's raining soup, grab a bucket." And, most of the sunlight that is coming out of our local star most of that energy is just going to waste. It's not being used. We could have a universal basic income based on sunlight. In fact, there's a professor up in UC Santa Cruz named Robert Staten. He has a great site called Solar Dividends, and it's a way to build these cooperative solar plants for communities, price all the power at $1 a kilowatt hour, but also establish a UBI based on that. And, actually, that would be a logical unit for a Kardashev civilization money system, is the kilowatt hour of renewable energy. Right now we have this, the dollar is the global standard. It's like, I guess that was based on our ability to have the biggest military and, extract the repayment of the debt from indefinite levels of future generations. But we should really be transitioning to a global monetary unit like the solar kilowatt hour, and in also building a totally interconnected grid. If the day and night side electric grids of the Earth were interconnected, you've got a surplus on one side and a deficit on the other. You connect the grids, load balances out. Guess what happens? The price of a kilowatt hour goes down dramatically. You probably have to do things like high voltage DC grids, like 1,000,000 volt DC grids, to do these long distance transmissions with low loss. But anyway, these are technical details that are pretty well figured out. Solar power stations are becoming a reality. It's entirely feasible to beam power back from orbit 24 hours uninterrupted, where the sunlight can be harvested. And no, the birds are not going to turn into fried chicken when they go through the beam. The beam is phased in such a way that, unless the receiving antenna is operating in the same phase, there's not going to be hazards for wildlife. So these are the kind of things that aren't being talked about, and that's frankly why I got into politics. I ran for city council the last 3 election cycles. Probably going to run again, but now I'm running with a national candidacy. So, hey, if an idea is good at the city level, it's probably going to work at the Spaceship Earth level. So I'm just kind of collecting all those good ideas into the campaign, and you can find me online with me and Tom Ross and the United States Transhumanist Party. You could be a member anywhere in the world, even though it's called US. We accept members from all over the world. And read the platform. It's probably the most scientifically pro-humanity, pro-science, pro-evidence-based ideas that you'll find in politics right now. So there's my pitch. I hope I didn't go too long.
Thank you, everyone, for joining today's session. This is our 929 episodes, and we are not only this dialogue, we are publishing a lot of research papers. Those who want to publish research papers, you can publish through World Talent Economy Forum. We have a conference in this October on Nikola Tesla technology. Tomorrow we have a session on Nikola Tesla technology. If you have a research on Nikola Tesla, you can share with us and we can publish your paper. Besides this, with IGI Global, we are also publishing research book on talent economy. You have any research work, you can publish with us. And we are taking a lot of real projects in emerging economy. Right now, we are focusing on Malaysia, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka and Singapore, this region, Asia Pacific region. And we are working with Prime Minister Office. We are working with different public and private university. We are working with largest corporations. We are working with small startup. We are working in the grassroots level village in the remote area. Millions of people engaged with World Talent Economy Forum. We are taking real projects. We are developing knowledge-oriented society. It's tough for us, but not impossible. So I want to give thanks from the grassroots level people, those who are supporting World Talent Economy Forum. Especially I want to give thanks the speaker. You are actually inspire a lot of people. You are supporting a lot of people. Your knowledge, your expertise, your experience, priceless. So how you contributing through World Talent Economy Forum? History gonna remember you. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.